Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Three High Safeties. I am Kevin Cole. I am joined by our other fantasy gurus here at PFF, Ian Hartitz and Andrew Erickson. The big news, so big they had to cut away from the game last night, was to let us know that Le'Veon Bell, one of, I won't say disastrous signings, but non-impactful high money signings that we've seen in quite a long time with the Jets, has been cut. The question will be two angles on this. You know, where can Bell go? What will be the fantasy impact potentially there that he could have somewhere else if you're holding him on the roster? The second thing is, it opens things up in the Jets backfield where you have some unattractive options like Frank Gore, but we really don't know what's going to happen going forward. So to you first, Ian, how are you assessing all the different fantasy implications of this release?
First of all, I'm just not really concerned with any of the other running backs the Jets have to offer. Look, I understand that Le'Veon was a far cry from the same guy we saw, taking over the league really for years, in Pittsburgh. But the Jets, only the Giants have been worse in yards before contact per rush. Last year, only the Dolphins were worse. I mean, it's only so much that any running back can do behind this line of scrimmage. I think we've seen that over the past 2 years. Adam Gase is good for one thing and one thing only, and that is enabling a fantasy-friendly slot receiver. So take Jamison Crowder, and other than that, I do not want anything to do with this backfield. In terms of where Le'Veon could go, I mean, it's just going to come down to, is someone willing to make him the feature back, or is he just going to be leaned on as more of a pass down back? We've never seen him as anything other than a workhorse 3-down back. I would kind of be shocked if he decides to go somewhere without that guarantee. But, I think Chicago is kind of the popular place. That does seem to make a lot of sense. Having that Tariq Cohen injury, having really nobody behind David Montgomery other than my guy, Cordero Patterson. But I think it's a situation where they probably don't want to be giving Montgomery as much work as they are right now. If Le'Veon isn't comfortable, going elsewhere and maybe to a worse team but getting more touches, I think Chicago is a, sneaky contender that he could play a good amount on.
Yeah, I think that the Bears make a lot of sense. They haven't shown a lot of interest in other running backs because they just want to feed David Montgomery, but that definitely makes the most sense. I think an interesting spot for Bell, maybe could be Tampa Bay. They dipped their pool back into the veteran running back market. They didn't shy away from signing Fournette. They signed Le'Veon Bell, and both those guys are dealing with injuries. So we don't know the extent of those injuries. And, maybe they just want, hey, this is the pass catching back that we know we wanted, and this is the guy we can get. So I think that Tampa Bay could be a wild card option for, and again, as someone that's been supportive of Ronald Jones, it pains me to say it, but they can still upgrade as at the, pass catching running back position. But when it comes to the Jets running backs, again, the popular guy would probably be Michael Pirine. He was the one that they drafted this year from Florida. He has some pass catching chops, but a person I'm interested in, maybe it's in deeper leagues and dynasty formats, I've tried to pick him up everywhere I can, is Ty Johnson. He had a little bit of a run last year with the Lions. And look, we're seeing Travis Fulgham, who was released by the Lions just this year, basically take off with another team. So it's not like the Lions have a great track record of, evaluating and keeping talent on their roster. So, perhaps Ty Johnson slipped through the cracks. They didn't keep him because you have to keep Adrian Peterson. So I think that Ty Johnson is an interesting player. He has 4.3 speed. He had 24 catches last year. And obviously Bell's biggest, what was attractive about him was his ability to catch passes. So obviously he's not there anymore. Kalen Ballage isn't there anymore. So I think that Ty Johnson would be an option of someone to go and pick up.
Yeah, and when it comes to Bell, maybe it makes too much sense or it's too obvious, but Pittsburgh Steelers to me seem like a place that he can go to. He could have a big role. Obviously, he fits in the system. There was some bad blood when he left, but he was offered a longer-term extension there. This wasn't a situation where they wanted to get rid of him. It was more him stepping back. So at this point, maybe if he's been a little bit humbled probably by what's happened here. If he could step back in, he could fit into that system. We know that he can thrive there. And it's not like they're really in love with James Conner or any of the other options that they have there. So I think to have an immediate impact, that would be the place where Bell was going to benefit the most from a fantasy perspective coming in.
I like that call, Kevin. All right, guys, moving on here. Falcons head coach Dan Quinn finally fired. Did not take any coordinators on his way out this time around. Still have a seemingly high-powered offense. Still hasn't looked that way over the past few weeks. What are our expectations for Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley moving forward? Andrew, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it just depends on the health of Julio and whether he's playing or not. The splits this year so far with Matt Ryan, he's scoring over 35 fantasy points per game with Julio in the lineup, fully healthy, and without him, he's barely hitting double digits. So again, it has to do with Julio. You can't start Matt Ryan at this point unless Julio is in the lineup. So I'd be willing to go back to Julio Jones, especially, or back to Matt Ryan, especially in this matchup this week against the Vikings. So I'm not shying away if Julio is healthy. And I think Calvin Ridley probably falls into a kind of like a sell high category. He's played really well this year. He's one of the top wide receivers, but the way that this Falcons team is trending, they could be a team that later down the stretch maybe starts shutting guys down. Matt Ryan is an older quarterback. Is he in their future plans? The owner didn't, say, hey, we're committed to him long term. He's committed to the rest of the season. But again, this Falcons long-term outlook doesn't look great. And obviously, if Julio comes back, that could also eat into Ridley's, share of the offense. So I think that Calvin Ridley's a potential sell high candidate. How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I don't think things are going to change a lot here. The only thing that could potentially happen is, you have interim head coach Reed Morris coming in there. Maybe they can be a little bit more risk-taking sometimes circumstances because, the chances for the season are over. And whether or not he's coaching for his job is a little bit more up in question than it was with Quinn. And I also want to thank Andrew for getting through that whole answer without mentioning that Matt Ryan was his fade last week. So that was very modest on your part, and I appreciate that. So I think it's just kind of steady state going forward where they have all the pieces. They're doing well. We've seen guys like Gurley performing a little bit better going forward. So if anything, I would just say this probably going to revert back more to what we saw earlier in the season where those passing game options, if healthy, become more of the focus and not as much of Todd Gurley I'm expecting going forward.
Yeah, it's a good point about Gurley. I think we all kind of figured he'd be washed and, he was on everyone's fade list going this year. But credit to Gurley for actually playing some pretty good ball so far. The lanes seem awfully wide as we're watching it. But at the end of the day, we got to give the guy credit when he's putting up these numbers. Averaging a career high 0.2 missed forced tackles per attempt right now, 3.5 yards after contact per carry. We're not seeing Jeff Fisher Gurley. We're not even seeing 2019 Gurley either. So not quite the same guy that was, taking over the league with the Rams when they were, top scoring offense in the league or anything, but has certainly outperformed my expectations on an 0-5 Falcons team trending downwards. I think there's a good chance we've already seen his best days of the season, but he's already exceeded my expectations. So good on you, Todd Gurley.
Love it. So Todd Gurley is probably a player that a lot of people are talking about selling high on. So talking about trades in general, we'll start with you, Kevin. Who is a player that you're you suggest trying to acquire in a trade?
Yeah, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be my high-end option here. It hasn't worked out the way that people were hoping when he was being touted as, by some for even being the number one overall fantasy running back potentially. But I think most people were in that 5, 6, 7 range. But the thing is, he's had the opportunity that you want. It's been a combination of some poor either performance or poor luck near the goal line, and just a team that's been a little bit out of sorts offensively in some of these matchups for the Kansas City Chiefs eventually. If you look at the rushing touchdowns, Mahomes is getting those, and then there really isn't a lot else to go around. So eventually that's going to shift over. Edwards-Helaire had a touchdown taken away via penalty last week. So if he scores that, I think the narrative around him is quite a bit different. And he's really taken over not only the rushing component, but the receiving component of that backfield. So I think if you can just look at it independent of what the actual results have been, if you could say this usage, that offense, we'd be talking about a guy who in fantasy drafts would maybe be talked about as the number one overall pick, knowing all those things are going to happen. And I wouldn't view him that way going forward, but I would view him at a higher level than what the market has him at right now.
Yeah, I'm going to go with another rookie running back I think you can get for a cheaper value than you could, this time a month ago, and that's Jonathan Taylor. Clear-cut lead back of a Colts offense that, similar to the Chiefs in a way, we haven't seen them gel in quite the manner that we expected, particularly the offensive line. I know Anthony Costanzo was out last week, their stud left tackle, and better days are going to be ahead, but, Taylor actually hasn't looked all that great in terms of, the advanced metrics and yards after contact per attempt. For someone that was coming into the league with such high expectations, hasn't quite fulfilled those just yet, but, take a step back. We're still looking at it, the clear-cut lead back getting 15 to 25 touches per game. He was a PPR RB13 going into Tuesday Night Football, so it's not like this guy has been burning you weekly, and the big games are going to come. Weeks 2 through 4, the issue was just that the Colts were beating teams so badly that Jordan Wilkins ended up taking most of the fourth quarter work, a la, what Gus Edwards usually does with the Ravens. We saw last week in a, more negative to neutral game script game, Wilkins wasn't even involved, under 10% snaps, and it was Taylor Taylor and Nyheim Hines. The pass game usage, I think, has actually been a positive for Taylor compared to what we were expecting. I mean, Hines is clearly the lead pass down guy, but Taylor is still getting involved there. I think the talent's going to shine. We've seen this in years past, Miles Sanders last year, Ezekiel Elliott in 2016. Sometimes it takes rookies a month or two to get accustomed to the NFL game, get their feet under them. I think the best days are still to come from Jonathan Taylor. He's already been a borderline RB1. And if you can get someone to sell him to you, for closer to the floor than his ceiling, sign me up.
So the one thing I'll say about Clyde Edwards-Helaire is I am just a little concerned about the fact that, yes, he hasn't been scoring the touchdowns, but I don't know if that's something that's all, luck-based. You look at his rushing grade inside the 10-yard line, and it ranks 72 out of 73 running backs this season that have at least one carry, and the Chiefs have been super pass-aggressive in the goal line. Inside the 10-yard line, they throw the ball at the third highest rate, and they just lost their starting guard, Kelechi Osemele. So that's just one reason I'm maybe not as high on trying to acquire Edwards-Helaire maybe as you are, Kevin. And I just think that's something important to note. Again, obviously he plays on a super explosive offense, but if I could flip, Edwards-Helaire for someone like Josh Jacobs as a trade that I've seen floated out as an option, I think I would prefer the Jacobs side. But one of the running backs I do kind of want to acquire, again, it's going to sound gross because he's part of a committee, is Darrell Henderson. And again, I'm trying to, look at this situation as, again, the market has really gotten smart. We know about the opportunities of certain players. So you really need to kind of look at things more specifically and okay, well, what kind of touches are these players getting? And Darrell Henderson has been the complete goal line back for the Rams when Malcolm Brown has been there, when Cam Akers has been there. It's all about Darrell Henderson. He ranks second in the NFL in carries inside the 10-yard line with 13. And I just don't see that not, continuing based on the fact that the Rams run the ball at the highest rate of any team inside the 10-yard line. And it's been Darrell Henderson that they've been continuously going back to. So again, people are going to be willing to part ways with Henderson because of the fact, Cam Akers came back. He looked really good. Sean McVay talked him up. Sean McVay talks up a lot of guys. So I'm not necessarily going to buy that as gospel. So I think that, hey, Henderson has showed juice. He's had 3 really productive weeks this season. Better than any other Rams running back so far this year. He has explosiveness, so I think that Henderson is someone that an owner may or may not, kind of really value as highly as someone else.
You want to get rid of me and get back to more great PFF YouTube content? All you have to do is push that button right there and subscribe. Thanks for watching.